Good morning. My name is Leana. Growing up, this is how I spoke. My stutter was often so bad that I couldn't get out any words at all. One of my earliest memories is hiding in the janitor's closet so that I didn't have to talk to anyone during recess. In second grade, I stabbed myself with a pencil so that I could get out of answering in class. That piece of pencil lead is still on my thigh as testament to my shame. Stuttering was this looming cloud that cast a shadow over everything I did. I couldn't get rid of it, so I tried to hide it. Words that began with W, N, and L always tripped me up, so I avoided them. I never asked for water, only something to drink. I wanted to take a class in neuroscience, but couldn't pronounce the word, and so never registered for it. I never introduced myself because my name, Leana, wasn't something I could easily substitute. I became so good at hiding that people rarely heard me stutter, but they also rarely heard me speak. I was terrified of being found out. And there were so many words that I could never say, so many things I could never do. If only I could get rid of my fear. Surely fear is something bad, something that prevents us from reaching our goals. Last year, researchers published a paper in the journal Science about how fear has been mapped to specific neurons in the brain in the part called the amygdala. That led to speculation that maybe we can end fear once and for all. Now think about your deepest, darkest fear. Imagine if you could banish it forever. Well, as it turns out, there are some people who don't have fear, like SM, a middle-aged woman who had a rare disease that destroyed her amygdala and therefore her fear response. Scientists have tried their best to scare her. They took her to haunted houses. They handed her poisonous snakes. They even had a man with a knife grab her suddenly. But instead of sweating, pulse racing, screaming, what any of us would do, right? She laughed. She reached for the poisonous snake. She had a conversation with a knife-wielding man. Life might be easier for SM, but probably more dangerous, and also a lot less interesting. How many of you have heard of Brené Brown? So Brené talks about how we can't selectively numb emotions. It's like those creams that are supposed to target cellulite only on your hips, right? They don't work. Though recently I've started to look into anti-wrinkle facial creams. Do you ever wonder when that happens? 1 minute, you have a fake ID. You want everyone to think you look older. And then all of a sudden, you're upset when bartenders don't even ask you for identification anymore. If you're not laughing, you haven't gotten to that part yet. Just wait and see. My little sister is 11 years younger than me, and there's never been any confusion about who's the older sibling. We were recently at this party when this guy asked us, which one of you is older? Well, that question made both of us really happy, until he said he knew why, because we're on two sides of the line. So of course I had to ask him then, what line is that? I don't think he talked to us for the rest of that party. My point is that if we try to numb fear, we run the risk of numbing everything else too. And maybe fear could actually be good for something. There's a quote in Chinese that you have to eat bitter to taste sweet. Books and movies are filled with stories of success that come only after the hero overcame significant fear and a lot of adversity. So if that's the case, then how do we select for the good parts that lead to building character rather than destroying confidence? To answer this question, I had to first come to terms with myself. By the time I was finishing college, I was the master at overcompensation. Because I couldn't speak up in class, I had to try to prove myself some other way. And so I studied all the time. I camped out in libraries. I barely had friends, and I never went out. I was desperately unhappy. Although on the bright side, I was the ideal Asian student. The daughter that Tiger Mom would have loved to call her own, right? The first time that I went to a speech therapist, I was my typical reclusive type A self. I remember sitting down and saying to her, I would like some strategies for dealing with my problem. Can you please give me some tips, some exercises that I can do in my room, in private, on my own time? I promise you, I'll do this 5 times a day, 2 hours at a time, every single day, whatever it takes. But here's the catch. We can't tell anyone that I stutter. In fact, let's not even call it that. Let's just call it my little problem. My therapist, Vivian, is a very wise woman. She sat there, and she listened to me. She nodded like she actually agreed with my speech. Sure, she said, except for one thing. Hiding is the source of your little problem. And we have to start your therapy by telling people that you stutter. I barely let her finish that sentence before I made a run for it. Literally, I ran out of her office. And you have to understand that I have a terrible sense of direction. My husband says that I can't find my way out of a wet paper bag. And so, of course, what I do, I ran down the hallway in the opposite direction. And I had to come back and ask her where to go. So if you want to make a dramatic exit, that's not the way to do it. So I came back, and I left my purse in her office again and had to come back again. Anyway, really bad exit. So then I went home, and I decided that I was going to prove her wrong. So I borrowed every single book I could find on stuttering. I checked out videos. These were the days before YouTube, so it wasn't easy to Google and YouTube videos, so it took some time. But I found hundreds of exercises, and I did them all. Well, you know what happened. Nothing worked. Actually, the more that I tried to hide my stuttering, the worse it became. Soon, I couldn't pronounce words starting with half the alphabet. I stopped going to class. I called in sick at work. I couldn't bear the thought of anyone seeing me like this, and I literally wanted to die. Finally, I called Vivian and I said, I can't go on like this. Please help me. And so she did. We worked out a plan. I started out by stuttering to strangers, actual strangers like cashiers, gas station attendants, anyone that I encountered. The only rule was that I wasn't allowed to substitute words. I had to say whatever I wanted to say and stutter on it. And when you spend 22 years of your life hiding and avoiding this very thing, you can imagine how terrifying this was. But then I found something surprising. Just like today, when I stuttered to you, what did you do? You looked at me. Maybe you wondered what this is. Maybe you knew that I stuttered, but you didn't laugh. I didn't die. Each person that I stuttered to became a success because it meant that I could finally say what I want to say when I want to say it. But then came the really hard part. I had to tell my family and friends that I stutter. Forget for a moment how ridiculous this sounds, that I was the most afraid of people that I care the most about. Although when you think that identity is so closely tied to shame, maybe this isn't so hard to believe. Let me just say, though, that I did this telling really badly. I remember emailing this friend saying that there was something really important I had to tell him, that it could change the nature of our relationship forever. I don't know what he thought this conversation was going to be about, but both he and his girlfriend seemed relieved when I told them that it was actually about stuttering. Well, being you, the real you, is really hard. Actually, I have a confession to make. This is the first time that I've spoken in public about my stuttering. It's just... Thank you. It's just, it's easier to just lock that part of yourself that you're ashamed of in a door somewhere in a room somewhere, close that door, lock it, throw away the key. A part of me still cringes when I think about that little girl hiding in the closet with a piece of pencil lead in her thigh. And a part of me still wishes that I were never that little girl. No matter how fluent I may sound, I look at myself in the mirror every day and remind myself that I am a person who stutters. It's a part of my identity, just like being Asian American, a woman, a wife, a sister, a friend, a doctor. The moment that I try to hide it is the moment that I feel shame and that I feel fear. And that's because shame leads to fear, although shame isn't the same thing as fear. Fear is when you're afraid of something, afraid of doing or trying something. Shame is when what you're afraid of is yourself. As Vivian taught me, hiding feeds shame, and the antidote is openness. To overcome fear, we have to first overcome shame. Do you want to know another antidote to fear? Well, first, here's what it's not. I read a lot of applications from bright, ambitious students for medical school and fellowships, and here's how a lot of them go. I want to make a difference. I want to go to Africa to work on HIV. All right, HIV in Africa is a big problem. It's a big problem here too. Right here in Washington, D.C., HIV is an epidemic. If DC were a country, we would have a higher percentage of people living with HIV than Congo, Rwanda, Ethiopia, and 28 African countries. Now, I'm not saying forget about Africa, but if you want to make a difference, don't wait until you can travel 7,000 miles and buy a plane ticket only to go for 2 weeks. Make a difference in your community here and now. If you want to write, don't wait until the New York Times comes calling. Start your blog and start writing today. If you want to be a leader, don't wait until you do your 5th internship in Congress. Lead a cause that you believe in here and now. But how, you may ask? I don't have money or authority. Well, think about the great leaders of our time. Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr. Nobody handed them a sack of money or trust fund and gave them a prestigious title, right? Look at your TEDx organizers like Brian Doyle. I'm going to embarrass Brian for a second. He's hiding backstage just for this purpose. But 3 years ago, Brian was a high school student when his teacher asked him to help organize TEDx Youth in San Diego. He was so inspired that when he moved to DC, he helped to start TEDxFoggyBottom and helped to make this event into the amazing gathering that it is today. You know, Brian and his team, they're full-time college students. They didn't start out with money or authority. What they had was conviction. They took a risk. They knew that the other antidote to fear is action. What prevents action? 4 big bad words. What if I fail? Nobody likes to talk about failure, but we're at a conference about illuminating, and so let's shed some light on it. I want you to think about the last time that you failed. And I mean really failed. This is not an interview question. Don't tell me, I got a B+ in quantum mechanics as a freshman, and that's how I know that I'm actually a perfectionist. Think about a time that you really failed. And when you really failed and felt devastated, you felt awful. You locked yourself in your room and watched 20 hours of Downton Abbey reruns while wearing your old prom dress and eating Cherry Garcia ice cream. We've all been there, right? We all know the what if. A few months ago, I spoke at a community college in the farmlands of California's Central Valley. Nearly all the students there were immigrants and the first in their families to go to college. A lot of them wanted to be doctors, but they didn't believe that they could actually do it. This girl, Lisa, came up to me and told me that she was 9 when her father started having fever and trouble swallowing. They lived right across the street from a medical clinic, but he was too afraid to go because they were undocumented. That night, she watched as he choked to death on his own saliva. Lisa dreams of being a doctor. She works 2 jobs to support her mom and 3 younger siblings and to put herself through college. It's taken her 6.5 years, but she has a near 4.0 GPA, and she still volunteers every day at that clinic across the street. You know what her advisor told her? Not, "You're going to be great. This is so inspiring. Go for it." But be realistic, because people like you, students here, they don't become doctors. You wouldn't want to fail, would you? I wanted to take Lisa and grab her. Actually, I really wanted to grab this advisor. But I wanted to take Lisa and grab her and these other students and say to them, "You can do it. You should do it. Of all the people who should become doctors, it's you. It's your story, your authentic voice. That's what people will connect with. That's what will give you drive and passion in your career. That is your mission." Let's talk about these 4 big bad words. What if I fail? Well, I have 2 words back to that. So what? So what? What is the worst that will happen if you go for it? We actually all know the answer to this, right? Because we've all been there. We've all seen the what if. Nobody will laugh. If they laugh, that's their problem and not yours. You won't die. As Tina Fey says, you can't be that kid standing at the top of the water slide overthinking it. You have to go down the chute. If you still don't want to go down the chute, ask yourself a final question. What's the worst that will happen if I don't go for it? Who will it hurt? Last April, I was working in the Mass General ER when I heard that 2 bombs had gone off at the finish line of the Boston Marathon. My heart stopped because just a few minutes before, my husband had texted me to say that he was going to watch the race at the finish line. We lived right by the explosions. As patients started coming in, some not breathing, many missing arms and legs, all covered with blood and soot, I was so scared that the next patient I'd see would be my husband. I was so scared for him, for my neighbors, for my city, for my country. And yet that fear did not paralyze me because I knew what I had to do. If all of us as first responders, policemen, doctors, nurses, if we let fear consume us, if we couldn't do our jobs, who would it hurt? What would happen if Lisa and these other caring, committed students don't become doctors? Who will serve their communities? All of us are here today because other people made sacrifices, because they overcame fear and ate bitter for us. Now it's our turn for those that follow. My takeaway for you today isn't that we should end fear or that we should celebrate it. What I hope you take on is this challenge. I challenge you to find what it is that you're really ashamed of and bring it out into the open. I challenge you to figure out what it is that you really want to do and do it here and now. I challenge you to reframe your fear and turn it inside out, from shame for yourself into action for others, and spread the word. Thank you.